Hello everyone. Today I'm reading the Girl Crusoes. The last time, the girls just managed to get onto a lost island after escaping a shipwreck. Let's see what happens. Chapter 6. The Island Beautiful. Hot and panting from their exertions, the girls threw themselves down on the sand and for a time remembered nothing but their escape from what had seemed certain death. But presently Tommy sprang up, and, shading her eyes against the sun's fierce glare, looked long and anxiously seaward. An irregular white line marked the reef, but beyond that the ocean stretched out into the distance, without a spot upon its glistening surface. Her sisters joined her, and with their arms clasped about each other, they searched the horizon for the raft and Uncle Ben. None of them spoke. Each was afraid to utter her foreboding thought. Then they turned and gazed at the green woodland that rose almost from the brink of the sea. It was a perfect day, and the land to which they had come might as well be a paradise of the South Sea such as they had read about. But they were too anxious to be aware of its beauties. Mary caught Elizabeth by the arm. "Are there people?" she said in a whisper. "Savages, perhaps cannibals," said Tommy with a shiver. They stood holding each other, afraid to stir. Elizabeth for a moment had a wild notion of dragging the boat down again and putting to sea in the hope of meeting Uncle Ben. Dread of the unknown had possession of her, but she recognized that to act would be foolish, and crushing down her fears, she said quietly, "I think we had better look about a little. Perhaps Uncle has already landed." Hope springs up easily in young minds. "Of course," said Tommy valiantly. "Who's afraid? No, you go first, Bess, as you're the biggest. I know. You take an oar, and Mary another, and I'll take the boat hook." Thus armed, after making the boat secure, they took their way up the strand, through a gap in the wooded cliffs that seemed to have been carved out in some past time by a stream. They walked slowly and timidly, as if half expecting to find a savage lurking behind every bush and tree. But as they went on, and found no wild islanders to molest them, they began to be more aware of the beauty of their surroundings. On either hand there was a riot of splendid vegetation, strange plants and trees, some bearing brilliant flowers, others tempting fruits, grew in magnificent profusion, and birds gorgeous in color flitted from tree to tree. Here were feathery palms, there a cluster of small trees like hazels. All about, the ground was carpeted with masses of convolvulus and creeping plants innumerable, and the air was heavy with mingled scents. "What a lovely place," said Mary. "Not to us," said Tommy. "We might as well be in a desert. Oh, what's that? I saw something move." She pointed to the right hand, and for a moment the girls held their breath. Then they laughed, but very nervously. The something was nothing but a little animal, of what kind they knew not, that scuttled away into the woodland. They went on again, becoming less timid the farther they advanced, for there was no sight or sound to alarm them. They began to talk more freely, but always in low tones. "I suppose it is an island," said Tommy. "It must be," replied Mary. "There is no other land until you get to Australia, and that's thousands of miles away." "Then what shall we do if we don't find Uncle?" The question recalled to them all that had happened, and again they felt the bitterness of misery and despair. "We must keep up our spirits," said Elizabeth, trying to speak cheerfully. "At any rate, we shan't starve if these fruits are good to eat." "I don't see any breadfruit," said Mary. "Well, it looks as if we are to be Crusoes," said Tommy. "Only Crusoe was alone. Goodness, I couldn't bear to be alone. I should go mad. Do you think Uncle will find us, Bess?" "I hope and trust he will, dear. We are safe. Why shouldn't he be? Don't let's look on the black side of things. Shall we go back to the boy and eat some of the food we brought? It won't keep like the fruits." "Then we had better rest. I'm sure you are worn out. We can look around presently, when the sun isn't so hot." They returned to the boat, and made a meal of some biscuits and cold bacon, carving the bacon somewhat clumsily with their jackknives, remembering how their uncle had laughed at them for buying such manlike implements. "I'm terribly thirsty," said Tommy. I wonder if the water in the stream there is good to drink. She pointed to a brook that meandered down to the shore from amid the woodland above, purling musically and flashing like silver in the sunlight. There's not much fear of that, said Mary. I'll get some while you cut me another slice of bacon. The water was delightfully fresh and cool, proving that there was a spring somewhere in the interior. Having made a heartier meal than any of them expected to make, they lay down under the shade of a large tree and talked until they fell asleep from sheer fatigue. The air was much cooler when they awoke. At Mary's suggestion, they climbed to the highest point of the cliffs, from which they could command a wide prospect over the sea. When they reached the summit, they scanned the surface, now as smooth as a lake, for signs of boat or raft, but nothing was in sight, except far away several dusky spots which Mary at once declared must be other islands. Very likely we drifted past them in the night, said Elizabeth. Look at that mass of floating seaweed just beyond the reef. You see there is quite a strong current. If we went as fast as that in the dinghy, we must have come miles from where the wreck happened, said Tommy. And Uncle won't know. He'll never find us. At this, the shadow of their misfortune once more descended on them, and they turned away from each other to hide their distress. Then Tommy swung round and cried, I won't be a baby! Bess, if you see any sign of waterworks again, smack me! What's the good of crying? Let's go exploring. That'll help to keep out the blues. But in spite of their brave attempts, they veered between hopefulness and despondency all the rest of the day. They roamed here and there, not really going very far, for they still felt safer within easy distance of their boat. More than once they returned to the cliff to search the horizon longingly for any sign of ship or boat, but always in vain. In the course of their wandering, they came upon some trees bearing fruit about which they had no doubt. Bananas! Cried Tommy with excitement. How jolly! And look at the clusters on the ground, we've only to pick them up. Several clusters had fallen from the trees and lay ripening where they fell. The girls ate some of the fruit, taking note of the position of the trees, so that they might come to them again. Then they strode on, keeping close to the shore, and stopping every few minutes to gaze yearningly over the sea for the raft they longed to behold. Turning their backs on this disappointing horizon, they let their eyes range over the island, their minds confused between admiration and wondering awe. The ground rose in a succession of irregular terraces, covered with vegetation in every imaginable shade of green. In the distance, the prospect terminated in a ridge, above which hovered a light mass of opalescent cloud. What forms of life were stirring amidst that dark woodland? What lay beyond that curtain of rose pink and pearl? The girls were awed by the mystery of things, as if subject to an enchanted spell. What's the time? Asked Tommy presently, bringing them back to the commonplace. Both Mary and Elizabeth had watches pinned upon their dresses, but on looking at them they found that each told a different hour and both had stopped. I forgot to wind mine up, said Elizabeth. So did I, said Mary. It must be getting late, said Tommy. Look at the sun. It was clear from his position that night was at hand, and then Tommy asked a question that brought back all their uneasiness. Where are we to sleep? I've thought of that all day, said Elizabeth. Then it's clear you are the statesman of the family, said Tommy. I could have thought of it all day without telling you, and you haven't said a word. It didn't occur to me until a moment ago. There are no wild beasts in the South Sea Islands, at least I never heard of any, said Mary. That's one comfort, said Tommy, and we see no savages or anything else to alarm us. Now, if we were Boy Scouts or something, used to campaigning in the open, we shouldn't care a pin. But I feel dreadfully shaky. What are we to do? We must face it, said Elizabeth quietly. I think myself we had better stay in the boat. How awful! Think of last night, said Tommy dolefully. Perhaps there will be a storm, we should be upset or blown out to sea, said Mary. Oh, I didn't mean to launch a boat, said Elizabeth. That would be too risky. We'll leave it on the beach. It's only a bit better than being in the open, said Mary. I know. Why not make a fire to scare off intruders? I read about that being done. That's quite brilliant, said Tommy. And it will be a beacon too. Perhaps Uncle will see it. Let's go back at once and get ready for supper and bed. Elizabeth was glad of any activity that would keep them from thinking of their troubles. They returned to the beach. First they collected a number of stones, which they piled up to make a rough fireplace. Then they gathered a large quantity of twigs and dry grass from the edge of the forest, and finding several small trees which had been uprooted by storms, they lugged these down to their fireplace. Then the self-lighter which Tommy had received from her uncle came in handy, and by the time it was dark, they had a bright, pleasant fire that was very cheering. They ate more of their biscuit and bacon, with plum cake for sweets and banana as dessert. Then, having heaped some fuel on the fire, they crept into the boat and arranged themselves as comfortably as possible. Tommy was soon asleep, but the elder girls lay awake for a long time, clasping each other and talking in murmurs so as not to disturb their sister. "Mary dear," said Elizabeth, "we must look at the worst side and face it, for Tommy's sake, you know." "Yes, I know. She's not really very strong, is she? Though she has such spirit." "No, she'll be alright so long as she doesn't get rich, so we won't say a word to depress her. We ought to be thankful that we are safe so far. I'm afraid to think of what had happened to Uncle, but supposing he is lost, we shall have to do as well we can until we are seen from a passing ship." "Suppose we never are?" "We won't suppose that. Think of the many castaways who have been picked up in time. By the look of it, we shall find food here, and I rather fancy the island must be uninhabited, or we should have seen some sign of people." "We haven't been all over it yet." "No, of course we can't be sure. If we do come across people, we must try to make friends with them. Aren't there some islands called the Friendly Islands because the people are quite decent?" "Yes, some of the islanders in these parts are gentle and peaceable, but I'm dreadfully afraid of savages." "So am I, but we won't think of them. What a lovely night it is, so still and peaceful, and we're just 3 insignificant dots in all this great, beautiful universe." They mused in silence, and by fell asleep. Dawn found them very cramped and stiff. The fire was out, and as they shivered in the cool morning air, they felt something of the previous day's despondency. But Elizabeth, with determined cheerfulness, called to her sisters that it was breakfast time. They made themselves some coffee, using the extract sparingly to eke it out as long as possible, and after bathing their faces in the water of the brook, ate their simple breakfast, and then made their way to the top of the cliff to search the ocean once more for a sign of help. The sea was even calmer than it had been yesterday, and as the mist rolled off its surface, they were able to scan countless miles of space. There were the same dark distant shapes, purple in the early sunlight, and they felt a wondering curiosity about them, but there was no sail or funnel that betokened the ship. First, one and another discovered a speck on the skyline, and they debated whether it was or was not a boat. But after gazing until their eyes were tired, they came to the conclusion that there was no immediate hope of rescue. "We ought to raise a flag of distress," said Mary, "which might be seen if a ship comes near, but we haven't anything big enough." "Oh yes we have," said Tommy. "If we tie our silk scarves together, they'll make a fine flag." "But we haven't a flagstaff," said Elizabeth. "There's a lovely one," said Mary, pointing to a tall, slender tree that stood a little apart from the nearest clump of woodland, like a sentinel thrown out seaward. "Can you climb that, Tommy?" "Rather. Father didn't like me climbing. But if I hadn't, where should we be now?" Elizabeth knotted the 3 scarves together. Then Tommy ran to the tree and climbed nimbly almost to the top, the others watching her breathlessly. Soon the flag of red and white was fluttering in the light morning breeze. "It will be torn to shreds by the first storm," said Tommy when she descended. "Let's hope it will be seen before a storm comes." They spent the day much as they had spent the first one on the island, sitting on the beach, now and again visiting the cliff to take another look across the sea, gathering bananas from the little plantation, and wandering for a short distance along the shore. "What shall we do when all the bananas are gone?" asked Tommy as they ate their dinner. "The food we have in the boat won't last a week." "We shall have to go exploring," said Mary. "I can't believe that these bananas are the only eatable fruits, and no doubt there are more bananas somewhere." They looked up once more at the distant mysterious ridge. "I don't know how you feel," said Tommy, "but I'm rather scared of going far from the beach. Who knows what we might find among those trees?" "We might go a little farther than we did yesterday," suggested Elizabeth. "Come along then," said Tommy. "Oh, gracious, what's that?" She pointed towards the ridge. The other girls looked but saw nothing. "What is it?" asked Mary. I saw a large beast cross over that bare spot, replied Tommy. I think you must have fancied it, said Mary. Rubbish! I tell you I saw it. But there aren't any large beasts in these islands, said Mary. How do you know? You think you know everything, said Tommy sharply. Just because you read a few books. I tell you I didn't see it. It couldn't be a large animal all the same, persisted Mary. You're an idiot, cried Tommy. Elizabeth saw it was time to intervene. The girl's nerves were a little on edge. I dare say you are both right, she said tranquilly. Tommy evidently saw something, and though there are no large latent animals, Mary, perhaps it's an important one. We can't tell but that there are people over there and they might have anything, you know. Of course they might, said Tommy triumphantly. It might be an elephant or anything. And so the little storm blew over, but it made Elizabeth very thoughtful. As she lay awake that night, she resolved that something must be done to occupy their thoughts. It'll never do to idle away our time as we've been doing, she said to herself, or there'll be constant bickerings, and we shall all get slack and mopish. Oh dear! And she did not sleep before she had made a plan. Chapter 7. A Local Habitation. Now, my dears, said Elizabeth as they sat at breakfast the next morning, I've got an idea. Hooray! Cried Tommy. What is it, Bess? It's just this. We must act as if we are going to stay on this island forever. Tommy gasped, and a look of dismay came into her eyes. Don't you think we'll be rescued then? She asked. Oh, I don't give up hope. We may be seen for a ship any day, or Uncle may come for us, but we can't depend on it. Plenty of men and boys have been shipwrecked like us on a lonely island, and have managed to shift for themselves. Why shouldn't we? We're used to outdoor work, at least I am. And it would be an odd thing if we couldn't manage to make ourselves comfortable on an island like this, with half our work already done for us. What do you mean? Asked Mary. Why, you're right about there being plenty of fruit, and I don't see why you shouldn't be. We shan't have to grow our food, and that's a chief thing. So we shall have more time for other things. The first thing is to see just what we got. Here's mine. She turned out her pocket and displayed 2 handkerchiefs, a thimble, a small whistle, and her jackknife. That's not a great deal, she said, smiling. Now, Mary, there's my knife, and a hanky, and my little penknife, and hooray, my housewife! And as she suddenly remembered that on the night before the storm, she had been mending her uncle's clothes, the recollection almost moved her to tears. I got the most, said Tommy with a laugh. Look here, scissors, hanky, some bits of string, my matchbox, jackknife, picture postcard, and airplane. Wish we had an airplane, and... She had unfolded a much-worn scrap of paper. She folded it again and replaced it in her pocket. What is it? Asked Elizabeth. It's only that stupid old recipe for butterscotch, no good to us here. They all smiled. Well, we can't boast of much in the way of personal possessions, said Elizabeth, but we had the boat, 2 oars, a boat hook, the painter, a few cups and things, my string bag, that's a lucky find, and our Macintoshes. More than Crusoe had. Not so much, Bess, said Mary. You don't remember. I always think Crusoe was jolly lucky. I dare say you are right. Well, we've taken stock. That's one good thing done. Now what do you say to building a hut? What? With scissors and knives? Asked Mary. You'll see, we ought to try, I think. The weather is lovely now, but I shouldn't care about sleeping in a boat in a rainstorm, even under a Macintosh. And you know how it rains in these tropical parts. It'll be great fun, said Tommy, but I don't see how it's to be done. We'll have to cut down some saplings with our jackknives. I don't quite see myself what we shall do next, but that'll be a start anyway, and I dare say ideas will come as we go along. That doesn't sound much like an architect, said Tommy, but let's try. It will give us something to do and keep us from getting catty. Elizabeth smiled as she saw her intentions thus realized. We must choose our site, she said. Surveying, don't they call it? All settlements are made near running water, said Mary, so it ought to be near the stream. They followed with their eyes the course of the bright little stream as it flowed out of the woodland down to the shore. There was no suitable spot for the hut near at hand, and to find one involved going farther than they had yet ventured to go. But having now a definite object in view, they found themselves a little more courageous, and springing up, they set off along the bank of the stream towards a higher ground. They walked cautiously and in silence, looking about them with wide open eyes, ready to flee at the slightest alarming sight or sound. Suddenly Tommy said in a whisper, "Here, this is the very place." She indicated a grassy knoll some 12 or 12 feet above the bed of the stream. The girl stopped at its edge and looked at it. On the inland side it was fringed with a row of small trees. Seaward the view was uninterrupted. "It looks nice," said Mary. "Let's measure it." Elizabeth, being the tallest, stepped the grassy plot from end to end and from side to side. "I make it about 20 feet by 16, just about the size of our dining room at home." "I think you'll do splendidly. There's water close at hand. There are plenty of saplings in the wood beyond. And the hillside will protect us from storms unless they come from the sea." "And what a lovely outlook it has," said Mary, turning towards the sea. "We couldn't have a nicer place." "Then we will fix on it," said Elizabeth. "Now who's to be architect?" "Oh, you, Bess," said Tommy. "We're no good at that." "I'm afraid I'm not either," said Elizabeth, laughing. "But I suppose we ought to put out some posts for the walls and rig rushes and things between them. Anyway, the first thing is to cut down some stout saplings that'll be strong enough." "Well, there are plenty in the woods, quite close too," said Tommy. "But how can we cut them down? We haven't axes or saws," asked Mary. "We have our knives though," said Tommy. "Come on, let's begin." They went into the wood, where the trees at the edge were not at all dense, and selected several saplings of about the same height and thickness. They each dropped on her knees before one of the saplings, scratched a circular line on the bark, and began to hack away at this with a knife. For some time nothing was heard but the slight sounds made by the knives. Each girl worked hard as though engaged in a competition. But presently Tommy straightened her back and uttered a sort of sighing grunt. "How are you getting on?" asked Elizabeth, without desisting from her task. "All right," cried Tommy, stooping and setting to work furiously. "They shan't beat me," she said to herself. But in a few minutes Mary gave a plaintive little exclamation, dropped her knife, and rubbed her right hand with her left. "You're soon tired," said Tommy, working harder than ever. "I think my tree must be a especially tough one," said Mary. "I don't seem to make much impression, and my wrist does ache so." "Take a rest, dear," said Elizabeth. "Shouldn't we get on better to work at the same tree while the other rested? We could take it in turns. When we have cut down the first, we shall have something to show for our work." "A good idea," said Tommy, springing up and running to Elizabeth's tree. "You take first farewell, Mary." The two girls worked at the trunk from opposite sides. The air was growing hotter and hotter. The insects became very troublesome, and as time went on and the incisions they had made in the sappy wood were still very shallow, both felt very much discouraged. "We shall never get through the wretched thing," said Tommy in disgust. "Can't we snap it off, Bess?" "I'm afraid I will only splinter it," said Elizabeth. "It is a bother. What troubles me most is that our knives will be hopelessly blunted if it takes so long to cut one tree. Still, we must peck away. You rest now, Tommy, and let Mary try again." Tommy got up with relief and strolled a few yards away while her sisters continued their work. In a few minutes she came running back. "What idiots we are! Stop work, you two! We needn't break our backs on our wrists after all. Come and look!" She led them to the edge of the grassy knoll and pointed to three small trees standing within a few feet of each other about the same distance apart, and forming the corner the sort of a triangle. "There," she said. "Don't you see? There's half our work done for us. Those three trees can be the corner posts of our hut, and we can use the branches to make a roof." Quite excited at her discovery, she pointed out that two of the branches had each thrown out a branch about 7 feet from the ground, and the third had a branch a little higher. These overhanging branches protected one side of the triangle, and Tommy suggested that they could be employed as a framework upon which they might spread mats woven from the grasses on the bank of the stream. "It would take a terrible time to weave the mats," said Mary dubiously. "Not nearly so long to cut down trees, and not nearly so hard work. What do you say, Bess?" "It's a capital idea, but I can't weave." "Oh, we'll soon teach you that," said Tommy. "You didn't go to kindergarten like Mary and me, but it's not very different from the string work you did on board. Come along, make a start." They went hopefully to the bank of the stream, but when they tried to cut down the rushes, they found that their knives were already blunt. As the day was now very hot and they were hungry and tired, they resolved to have an early dinner. They rest for a while, and later on sharpen their knives on stones at the beach and try again. By the evening they had cut a large quantity of grasses, which they placed in a heap to be weaved next day. They decided again to sleep in the boat, and returned to it just before sunset by way of the clump of banana trees, carrying their supper with them. "We have made a good start," said Elizabeth cheerfully as they sat munching bananas in the boat. "Yes, but I tell you what," said Tommy, "I'm getting tired of bananas." "Already?" said Mary, smiling. "Don't you remember how you said once at home you'd love to live in a banana plantation, and you could pick as many as you like? And you told me the story of a greedy boy who loved cake and dreamt that he was in the middle of a big one and had to eat his way out. I was a silly kid then. Anyway, I'm sick of bananas now, and people say it's bad to have no change of diet." "But what can we do?" said Elizabeth. "We haven't seen anything else." "Except birds," said Mary. "Pigeon pie is quite nice." "We might sell some," said Tommy. "Or fish. What about fish? They'd be easiest to catch, I expect. I got some string, and we can easily find something that'll do for a rod." "And a bent pin for a hook," said Mary. "Now just listen to that," said Tommy. "Anybody would think we were going fishing for sticklebacks. No fish cooking would ever let himself be hooked by a bent pin. We'll find something better than that." "We'll see what we can do tomorrow," said Elizabeth. "We never done any sea fishing, and fishing in the river at home won't help us much, I fancy. Still, we can try, and I'd like a little fish for a change. You both look awfully tired, so let's go to sleep now. We shall have plenty to do in the morning." And Elizabeth, as she laid down that night, felt happy in the success of her plan. "If we can only keep busy," she said to herself, "all will be well. But I do hope it won't be for long." The three sisters realized soon enough that boredom is the next biggest danger besides loneliness. Because the three of them were still around and healthy enough, they didn't have to worry about being all alone. I really hope they won't be staying that long. Well, they realize at least they need to find some other source of food like fish. Tune in next week to see how the sisters try to find another source of food. Thank you for watching.